Financial Survival Network, helping you survive and thrive in the new economy. Go to carrylutz.com and sign up for 30 free micro trainings on financial survival.
$14.90 WGCH. This is Kerry Lutz. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. We've got a special roundtable discussion. If you're trying to figure out whether we need no government or limited government or excessive government, the two people you're about to hear from are going to answer that question for you. I've got Yaron Brook. He's head of the Ayn Rand Institute, and I've got Doug Casey of Casey Research. Our first question, and I'll direct it to Dr. Brook. What level of government, if any, is necessary to have a well-functioning society?
Well, I think that the question really is what is it that individuals need when they're in a social context, when there's more than a desert island? And I think that in order for individuals to thrive in that kind of social context, what they need is to be able to pursue their own values, to be able to rationally assess what is going on around them in the world, to use their reason. To do that, the one element in society that has to be extracted, the one thing that goes against their ability to pursue values, the one thing that goes against their ability to pursue reason, is force. And, that is the role of government. The role of government, in my view, is to extract the use of force from society. It's to be the one element in society that is responsible for the retaliatory use of force, the monopoly over the use of force, and to restrict the fraud, crime, violent crime, to provide an objective justice system. But other than that, to stay out of the lives of individuals. The Founding Fathers understood this as the concept of individual rights. So the one job of government is to protect individual rights, to protect our freedom from force, from coercion. It's a unique institution. It's different than any other market institution. It's outside of the marketplace, and its role is to protect individual rights. So in that sense, it should have a police, it should have a military, it should have a court system, and that's pretty much it.
All right, and Doug, we'll shoot the question to you. And what level of government, if any, is necessary to have a well-functioning society?
Well, I'm very sympathetic with what Yaron said, of course, because I'm a huge fan of Ayn Rand. I think she was, a genius of absolutely historical proportions. But my problem with Rand's philosophy is that she actually doesn't go far enough. And while what Yaron said is quite correct, if you're going to have a government, which is really congealed force, if you would, it ought to be restricted as much as possible. And that means restricted to protecting you from force. And that implies, as he said, police, an army, and a court system. But unfortunately, I think in the real world, these things always get out of control. And the thing is that protecting society from force is actually far too important to be left to a non-market institution. It's far too important to be left to the government, and especially the type of people that necessarily and always gravitate towards government because they like that concentration of force. They like being outside of the market. So I would say that although those are the only things the government should do, they're too important for a government to do. So I think that when it comes to the police, I would much rather trust to someone like Mike Hammer or even Magnum PI to pursue wrongdoers than I would some flatfoot hired by the, on a government salary. It would work out much better to have private policing agencies. And rather than have government courts, which are impossible to get in unless you violate one of their. But there wouldn't be those kind of laws under Yaron's government. But they're impossible to get in, and once you get in, they're impossible to get out. And if you do get out, you're bankrupted. So I'd much rather see private adjudication agencies that have to compete with each other based upon the speed and intelligence and fairness of their decisions. And as far as the military is concerned, that's the greatest single threat, although there are many, to the U.S. today. It's the U.S. military. It's bankrupting the country. It's the instrument for all these foreign adventures and making enemies and creating foreign wars. So I think that in today's world, actually a classical military is counterproductive, not necessary, as shocking as I know that is for some people to hear. So that's kind of my rebuttal, and I hate to be arguing with one of Ayn Rand's folks, because, as I said, I've got so much respect for her philosophy.
So essentially, Doug, you're saying the government that governs best is no government, and Yaron's saying limited government. What's your response to that, Yaron?
Well, I mean, I disagree with pretty much everything that I heard. I believe that force is not a market phenomena. Force is the anti-market. It is the anti-reason. It's anti-trade. It's anti-everything. And to pretend that you can create a marketplace in which force is adjudicated between different parties who all have guns is, I think, ridiculous and a fantasy. So, in my view, such a world reverts into a bloodbath, which ultimately leads to authoritarianism. So, I think it's a non-existent equilibrium, and what it actually results in, ultimately, the guy with the biggest gun gets to make decisions. And I think that is the evil of human existence pre the existence of the state. Now, of course, the state then used guns in order to oppress its own people, and that's the beauty of the Enlightenment, which comes up with a concept of individual rights and this notion that the state's job needs to be limited. Now, have we done a good job at it? No, but the reason we haven't done a good job at it has nothing to do with human nature. I think it has everything to do with the fact that we've never had a coherent philosophical defense of individual rights. That is, in my view, once we can convince people of Rand's philosophy about individualism and reject the morality of self-sacrifice and the collectivism associated with that, then I see no reason why we could not have a stable, truly limited government. I also, I don't want to get into a debate about foreign policy, but I certainly reject the notion that the American military is the essential evil force out there in the world. I think the American military, with all the flaws of American foreign policy, and they're huge, and we'd agree on a lot of bad things that America has done in the world. However, I believe that the American military right now is one of the few barriers that exists out there in the face of barbarism, that exists in the world. I think if we didn't have a strong defense and a strong military force, I think that barbarism would be at our shores. So I think again, there's this notion that many libertarians and anarchists seem to have that, the U.S. is the real villain on the international stage. I believe that's unbelievably false, in spite of the fact that our foreign policy has been terrible. The villains are out there, the real villains, the villains who want our throats are out there. I'm happy that we at least have a military that discourages them from unleashing their barbarism on our shores. So I'm happy we have a military. I don't believe private police forces can work. Certainly elements within the judicial system you could privatize, and even today you have arbitration and you have other private mechanisms, and even certain of the police aspects, you have private eyes, you have private security guards. But ultimately, you need an ultimate authority when it comes to violence, when it comes to force. And I think I think the problem with libertarians is not, Doug said something about Ayn Rand didn't go all the way. That's not the problem. The problem is I think she's misunderstood. That is, I think she goes all the way. I think if you understand her philosophy, her respect for her view of the necessity for government is a necessary feature of her philosophy. It's not an issue of slippery slope. It's a necessary feature. You cannot have trade and commerce when it comes to force.
All right, and Doug, what's your opinion there?
Well, there are a lot of things that I could address based on what Yaron just said. But first of all, I think you kind of imply the wrong view of humanity. My personal view on this, and you made a lot of assertions, which there's no proof for. I mean, we'd have to talk about what your proof for these assertions is, which I know you didn't have time to do. But let me state one of my premises, and that is that humans are basically good and decent, or most of them are. And I'm a believer in Pareto's law, the 80-20 rule. And the way I apply it in this situation is that 80% of all humans are basically good and decent and honest. And then 20% are what you might call potential trouble sources that can go either way depending on the ruling social and political climate. And then you take 20% of that 20%, or 4% of the whole, and you're dealing in bad apples. And take 20% of that 20%, and you're dealing with genuine psychotics, and so on. Now, here's the point that I'm making. It's that when you have an institution that is pure force, that is exactly where the worst people are going to go. That 20% and the 20% of the 20%, and then the real psychotics generally concentrate towards government, and they get control of the reins of the state. And then what always happens. It's the civilization starts to collapse because your government attracts these people like a pile of dog crap attracts flies. And it's a very good analogy. And it's inevitable that you get these aberrated people. So that's why I don't want to have the institution of government. And anything that needs doing and anything that people want will be supplied by the market. And it's not a question of people running around heavily armed and all killing each other. My experience tells me that an armed society is a polite society. And I think it would be much better, because of the fact that you've always got this standard distribution of sociopaths. It'd be much better if everybody could be armed without by your leave from some government. And then the last thing is speaking about the U.S. military. This isn't necessarily a comment on the average U.S. soldier, who's just a guy who generally comes from the lower middle classes and wants to improve his lot in life. So kudos to them based on that. But they're by far the greatest danger in the world today, and they're going to bankrupt the country. And when you're bankrupt, you're completely undefended. And with these people running around the world, killing people and destroying property, it's just creating enemies for America. And everybody used to love America. Now, around the world, people hate not the idea of America that used to be, but the United States, because it's an imperialist power that's gotten out of control.
Okay, so we're gonna have to do a part 2 of this, because I could see it's a lot deeper and a lot more extensive than I originally envisioned when I invited you to. But my next question,
Kerry, I gotta say, when we were joking before we started, and this is actually kind of funny that here we are on the freedom end of the spectrum as opposed to the collectivist statist end of the spectrum, and we find ourselves arguing with each other like the Trotskyites and the Stalinists and all these other socialist groups did.
Let me disagree with that, though. I don't believe that anarchy ultimately is on the freedom end of the spectrum, because I don't consider anarchy freedom. I think anarchy is ultimately an anti-freedom, movement, phenomena, idea, because I really believe, and I'm not kidding here, I really believe that it leads not to freedom, but to statism and authoritarianism. I really believe it is the rule of violence, and it's exactly what I want to get away from. So,
that's actually a ridiculous assertion where you have no basis to stand on. All anarchy means is no rule. That's all it means. It doesn't mean...
Yes, it means no rule. I agree with you.
Running around with capes and little bombs. That's not what it means.
I agree with that. But no rule, I believe, leads to statism and leads to authoritarianism. Look, I don't believe that an armed society is a polite society. I don't think there's historical evidence for that. The knights in the Middle Ages were armed, and homicide rates were out of control. The American West, where people were armed, homicide rates were out of control. So I believe that a world with no rule is a world I would not want to live in. I don't believe it's a world of freedom. I think it's a world of fear, and it's a world of violence. And it's a world that I think we've come a long way to try to get away from. And this is why this debate, I don't think, is just an academic debate. I think this is a deep philosophical issue about whether rules are legitimate or not, or whether there is a way to objectively determine good rules that help human beings survive when they're in the social context. And I believe strongly that there is such a thing as good rules, and that without those good rules, we revert back to a violent, pre-civilization society, and that's not something I want. Not something I want, and not something Ayn Rand wanted.
Yeah, you're missing the whole point. When I say I advocate anarchy, that doesn't mean that I don't believe in rules. That's got nothing to do with it. Of course you have rules. When you go into a restaurant, there's no government there.
Sure, there's a government. There's a protection of property rights that government provides, and without that protection of property rights that government provides, I could just walk into any restaurant if I have a big enough gun.
No, you can't. Look, first of all, get back to what I said before. Apparently, your view of humanity is that people are basically evil and have to be kept under control. Now, I don't. That doesn't correspond with my whole experience in life. And what keeps society together is three things. It's peer pressure, a moral opprobrium, and social approbation. That's what keeps society together. It's not a cop on the corner with enforcing rules that some government is making up. That's not what the common law is all about.
Yeah, but pure experience suggests that a cop on the corner, and we've seen this, that cops on the corner make a huge difference, an enormous difference to the level of crime that exists within a society. And the fact is that you're going to have cops on the corner even in your anarchy. The difference is that the cops on the corner are going to be privatized, and you're going to have your cops and I'm going to have my cops. And when there's disagreement, ultimately the only way to resolve it is going to be by use of force.
That's a ridiculous statement. How do you jump to that conclusion? How do you jump to that conclusion?
Because when two people are facing each other with guns and they disagree, they tend to draw those guns. See, this gets back to your view of humanity. You actually think people are evil and have to be controlled. And you're not addressing the fact that the really evil people always gravitate towards government. See, but I don't agree with that argument either. I don't believe evil people gravitate towards government. I believe that people are not motivated by the three things that you addressed. I believe that they're motivated by ideas, by their philosophy. And yes, bad people go into government because the philosophy out there is bad. I don't believe that the people in government are psychopaths. I think that's ridiculous. I think they are just people who take their ideas seriously. The ideas are bad, and what we need to challenge are ideas, and calling politicians psychopaths does not help our cause one bit. What we need to attack are the ideas that guide people to want to impose their will on all of us, and want to to sacrifice one group for the sake of another. What we need is to stand up for individualism and for a set of ideas that will limit the role of government, not to divide humanity up into the good guys and the psychopaths go into politics. I think it's ridiculous, and I think it's ridiculous as well to describe, certainly the military is not bankrupting this country. What's bankrupting this country
it's not.
are entitlements, clearly entitlements. And if you want an issue, entitlements, we're spending much more money on entitlements than we ever will in the military. The military's too big. I agree with that, but it's not what's bankrupting us. What's bankrupting us
we're
is Social Security, Medicaid,
we're spending about $900 billion on the military every year.
How much do we spend on Medicare? Medicare, we spend more than that, and we're going to spend a lot more than that. A lot more than that on Medicare. Just look at the unfunded liabilities in Medicare. So, the real challenge here is reducing entitlements if we're looking into the future and coming up with a privatized way in order to deal with that. That's much more useful than blaming the United States military for all the problems in the world. And again, if we study the ideology, because history is moved by ideas, not by psychopaths. And what we need is to study the ideas of that are being held by people in the world and in the United States today, and challenge those ideas and identify those ideas that present real threat to freedom and combat those ideologically.
Of course, I agree.
It's all about ideas, not about psychopaths.
No,
when ideas were good, then people like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington became politicians. When ideas are bad, then Obama becomes president. It's all about the ideas held in the culture, and that determines who goes into politics. And if we have good ideas, good people will go into politics. If we have bad ideas, bad people go into politics.
Yeah, well, it works both ways, okay? Because this country started out with basically good ideas. But as soon as bad people who are out there are psychopaths, there are sociopaths out there, there's a standard distribution across space and time. And eventually they insinuate themselves with these ideas like Social Security and Medicare and so forth, and they get into office. And right today, the U.S. government is overrun with these creatures. I mean, everybody from Obama to Hillary Clinton to Henry Kissinger hanging around, and Donald Rumsfeld recently. All these people are
all popular, which would say that everybody in America is a psychopath because everybody agrees with these ideas. And again, I don't think there's anything unique.
Well, that's an interesting point, because most Americans at this point do agree with these ideas.
They do.
I mean, you've
heard
that
when they were started as well.
It's called the third rail. I mean, at this point, you're not going to abolish any of these things. They're part of a U.S. culture. It's become so degraded. Well, and 50% of Americans are living off the state today.
All right. On that note, we kind of have to wrap up. Yaron, why don't you just basically summarize what it is that you're saying, and then Doug will do the same.
Again, I think that government has a role. Its role is to extract force, which I think is the real enemy from society. I don't believe everybody's evil. I quite the contrary. I think people are neither good or evil. I think it's the ideas that are going to determine whether people are going to be good or going to be evil. This is a battle of ideas, and I think it does us harm to present politicians as psychopaths or to present the U.S. military as the enemy. I think that hurts the cause of freedom, and I think it pushes us backwards instead of forwards.
Okay, and Doug, concluding comments?
Well, I'd say that the real enemy in the world is force and coercion, and government is the institutionalization of that coercion, and it legally disarms everybody outside of it. So it's the greatest danger, and it's got to absolutely be minimized. I could live in a society such as Ayn Rand proposed. I'm very sympathetic to all of her ideas, but she doesn't go far enough. And we have to strike at the root. And the root is the concentration of force in government. Government is not necessary from any point of view in a modern, advanced technological society. It's an anachronism at best.
Both of you, thank you so much. Hopefully, you'll both be at Freedom Fest this summer in Vegas. And I'll talk to Mark Skousen, and we'll get you guys both up there, give you more time, because this is a debate I believe that needs to be had. It's more important than the conventional debate of right versus left. It really gets to the core of man's relationship to himself and each other, and how we live together in a society in a productive manner. Hey, both of you, thanks so much for coming on the Financial Survival Network, and it's going to be good to see you guys duke it out live and in person.
Okay, thanks, Kerry. Nice to meet you, Yaron.
Nice to meet you.